Girl Scouts, this is Kaylee. You'll have seen me last summer at Camp Ikawa, but I am from Scotland. So I'm here to do a story time for you on Colour Me Crazy Week. I tried to find some crazy colourful headwear for the occasion. So the story that I have chosen has got colours at the centre. I'm going to read you the first chapter of the book. It is from a series called The Children of the Red King, and it surrounds a boy whose name is Charlie Bone, and he ends up going to a special school for children who are creative. So there are art children, music children and drama children, and depending on which one you're good at, you have a different colour school uniform. So the music children wear blue, the drama children wear purple, and the art children wear green. So I thought that would be a good story to kind of guide you into on this Colour Me Crazy Week. So I'm going to read the prologue in the first chapter of the first book, which is Midnight for Charlie Bone. These books were written by Jenny Nimmo. They are suitable for all ages. So, book one. There's a car. And there will be a link with this post where you can get the book on Amazon. Prologue. Long, long ago, a king arrived in the north. They called him the Red King, for he wore a scarlet cloak, and his shield was emblazoned with a burning sun. It was said that he came out of Africa. This king was also a marvellous magician, and each of his 10 children inherited a small part of his power. But when the king's wife died, 5 of his children turned to wickedness, and the other 5, seeking to escape the corruption that surrounded their evil siblings, left their father's castle forever. Broken-hearted, the Red King vanished into the forests that covered the kingdoms of the north. He did not go alone, however, for he was followed by 3 faithful cats, leopards to be precise. We must never forget the cats. The manifold and fabulous powers of the Red King were passed down through his descendants, often turning up quite unexpectedly in someone who had no idea where they came from. This is what happened to Charlie Bone, and to some of the children he met behind the grim, grey walls of Bloor's Academy. Chapter 1. Charlie Hears Voices. On a Thursday afternoon, just after tea, Charlie Bone saw smoke. He happened to be looking out of his window when a dark cloud lifted above the autumn trees. The wind blew it south, and it moved through the sky like a great floating whale. Somewhere on the other side of the city there was a fire. Charlie could hear a fire engine racing towards it. He had no idea that in mysterious and unexpected ways he was connected to it, and would soon be drawn to the place where it had begun. Charlie slept well, got up the next morning and went to school. After school, Charlie and his friend, Benjamin Brown, walked home together, as usual. The cloud of smoke had gone, but the sky was stormy and dark. A fierce wind sent red and gold leaves bowling down Filbert Street. Benjamin crossed the road to number 12, while Charlie stopped at number 9. Most of the people who lived at number 9 complained about the large chestnut tree in front of it, how dark it made their rooms, how damp and creaky it was, and how it would probably fall on the roof one day and kill them all in their beds. Needless to say, no one at number 9 did anything about it. Complaining to each other was as far as they went. They were that sort of family, or rather, those sorts of families. As Charlie ran up to the steps to his front door, the tree sighed and rained a handful of conkers onto his head. Luckily, his thick springy hair softened the blows. Thick hair had its uses, though not many. Charlie was always being told to smarten himself up, an impossible task for someone with hair like a hedge. "Hello, grandmas," Charlie called as he stepped into the hall. There were 2 grandmas at number 9. Grandma Jones was Charlie's mother's mother, and Grandma Bone was Charlie's father's mother. Grandma Jones was round and cheerful and bossy, while Grandma Bone only spoke to complain. She rarely smiled, and nothing made her laugh. Her hair was thick and white, and she wore long, stiff garments in shades of black, grey or brown. Never pink, which was Maisie's favourite colour. Grandma Jones liked to be called Maisie, but Charlie wouldn't have dared to call Grandma Bone by her first name, which was Griselda. She liked to remind people that before she had married Mr. Bone, she had been a U-beam. The U-beams were an ancient family, their history littered with artistic people and others who had more unusual talents, such as hypnotism, thought reading and bewitchery. Charlie knew he had disappointed Grandma Bone by being ordinary. Even worse, in her eyes, he was quite happy to be ordinary. When Charlie came home from school, it was always Maisie who plonked a wet kiss on his cheek and pushed a plate of something under his nose. Today, Maisie had a large bump on her forehead. "Ruddy conker," she told Charlie. Grandma Bone was always sitting in a rocker by the stove, criticising Maisie's cooking or the state of Charlie's hair. Today the rocker was empty, and that was the first unusual thing. It was Benjamin's 10th birthday on Saturday, and Charlie had decided to make him a birthday card instead of buying one. He'd taken a photo of Benjamin's dog, Runnerbean, smiling, or to be more precise, showing his long, incredibly yellow teeth. Charlie had asked his mother to get the photo enlarged at Quick Photo on her way home from work. He intended to stick a balloon saying, "Happy birthday, Benjamin," above Runnerbean's head. The second unusual thing was about to happen. At 4:05, Charlie's mother came in with a box of overripe apples and rhubarb. "They'll make a lovely crumble," she said, dumping the box beside Charlie's plate and kissing his shaggy head. Amy Bone worked part-time in a greengrocer's shop, so there was always plenty of fruit and vegetables at number 9. Charlie leaned away from the rotting fruit. "Have you got my photo, Mum?" he asked. Amy Bone rustled about in her shopping bag and found a large orange envelope. She put it on the other side of Charlie's plate. Charlie opened the envelope and revealed, not Runnerbean. Nothing like Runnerbean. It was at this moment Grandma Bone appeared. She hovered in the doorway, fingering her neck, touching her silver white hair and pulling at her stiff black skirt. She looked somehow as though she was on the brink of fulfilling her destiny. And in a way she was, though at 65 you could be forgiven for thinking it was a bit late. The photograph that Charlie now held showed a man cradling a baby. The man sat on an upright chair. He had thinning greyish hair and a long mournful face. His crumpled suit was black, and his thick pebble glasses gave his pale grey eyes a lost, marble-like stare. Instead of pushing the photograph back into the envelope, Charlie continued to gaze at it. In fact, he couldn't tear his eyes away from it. He began to feel dizzy, and his ears were filled with mysterious sounds, like the hiss and swish of voices on a radio, when you can't pin them to the right frequency. "Oh," he said, what?" His own voice seemed far away, trapped behind a fog. "What's wrong, Charlie?" asked his mother. "Is something happening?" Grandma Bone crept forward. "Aunt Eustacia rang me. She had one of her premonitions. Are you a proper U-beam after all?" Maisie glared at Grandma Bone, while Charlie pulled his ears and shook his head. If only the horrible, muffled buzzing would go. He had to shout in order to hear himself. "They've made a mistake at the shop. Where's Runnerbean?" "There's no need to shout, Charlie." His mother looked over his shoulder. "My goodness, that's certainly not a dog." "Ow!" wailed Charlie. But suddenly the mumbling voices broke free of the buzz and made themselves clear. First came a woman's voice, soft and unfamiliar. "I wish you wouldn't do this, Mostyn." "Her mother's gone. I don't have a choice." This voice was definitely male. course you do." "Will you take her then?" said the man's voice. "You know I can't," replied the woman. Charlie looked at his mother. "Who said that?" She looked puzzled. "Who said what, Charlie?" "Is there a man here?" he asked. Maisie giggled. "Only you, Charlie." Charlie felt claw-like fingers sink into his shoulder. Grandma Bowen leaned over him. "Tell me what you hear," she demanded. "Voices," said Charlie. "I know it sounds silly, but they seem to be coming from this photograph." Grandma Bowen nodded. "What do they say?" "For goodness sake, Grandma Bowen, don't be ridiculous," said Maisie. Grandma Bowen gave Maisie a withering look. "I am not being ridiculous." Charlie noticed that his mother had gone very quiet. She drew out a chair and sat down, looking pale and anxious. Maisie began to bang saucepans about, muttering, "You shouldn't encourage it. It's all rubbish. I won't have it." "Shh!" hissed Charlie. He could hear the baby crying. The strange woman spoke again. "You've upset her. Look at the camera, Mostyn, and please try to smile. You look so dismal." "What do you expect?" said the man. A camera shutter clicked. "There. Shall I take another?" "Do what you want." "You'll thank me one day," said the woman behind the camera. "If you really intend to go through with this, it's the only thing you'll have to remember her by." Charlie noticed that a cat peeked from behind the man's chair. It was an extraordinary colour, deep copper, like a flame. Far away, Charlie heard his mother's voice. "Shall I take the photo back, Charlie?" "No," murmured Charlie. "Not yet." But it seemed that the photograph had nothing more to say. The baby grizzled for a moment, and then was quiet. The gloomy man stared silently at the camera, and the cat... was that a purr? Maisie was making such a noise with the saucepans, it was difficult to hear anything else. "Hush!" commanded Grandma Bowen. "Charlie can't hear." "It's all nonsense," Maisie grumbled. "I don't know how you can just sit there, Amy, and let your haughty mother-in-law get away with it. Poor Charlie, he's just a boy. He's got nothing to do with those crazy U-beams." "He's got their blood," said Charlie's mother quietly. "You can't get away from that." Maisie couldn't. She closed her mouth in a tight little line. Charlie was very bewildered. In the morning, he had been an ordinary boy. He hadn't been touched by a magic wand or banged his head. He hadn't had an electric shock or fallen off a bus or, as far as he knew, eaten a poisoned apple. And yet, here he was, hearing voices from a piece of photographic paper. To set his mother's mind at rest, Charlie said, "I don't think it was anything really, I just imagined it." Grandma Bowen leaned even closer and breathed into his ear. "Listen tonight. Things work better after midnight." "He'll be asleep by then, I will have you know," said Maisie, who had ears as sharp as a rabbit's. "It's all rubbish." retorted Grandma Bowen. "Just you wait." She wafted away, leaving a scent of mothballs and mint drifting round the kitchen. "I didn't hear anything," Charlie said, when she had gone. "Are you sure?" his mother said anxiously. "Honest. I was just doing it to tease Grandma Bowen." He was trying to convince himself as well as his mother. "Charlie, you're a wicked boy," Maisie said happily, as she banged a meat cleaver into a meaty bone. Charlie's mother looked relieved and opened the evening paper. Charlie slipped the photograph back into its envelope. He felt exhausted. Perhaps a bit of TV would help him to relax. But before he could escape, the doorbell rang, and Grandma Bowen could be heard saying, "It's Benjamin Brown, isn't it? Charlie's in the kitchen, and you can leave that mangy baked bean outside." "It's runner, not baked," said Benjamin's voice, "and I can't leave him outside. It's nasty weather." "Dogs like nasty weather," said Grandma Bone. Benjamin and his dog appeared in the kitchen. Benjamin was a small, pale-faced boy with hair the colour of damp hay. Runner Bean was a large, long-nosed dog, also with hair the colour of damp hay. For some reason, Benjamin was always being picked on by other boys. People stole things from him, tripped him up, laughed at him. Charlie tried to help his friend, but sometimes Benjamin was beyond help. Sometimes, in fact, Charlie thought that Benjamin didn't even notice that he was a victim. He lived in a world of his own. Runner Bean, smelling the meaty bone, rushed straight to Maisie and began to lick her ankles. "Get off!" she yelled, swiping him on the nose. "You're coming to my party, aren't you?" Benjamin asked Charlie. "Course I am," said Charlie, immediately feeling guilty about the birthday card. "Good, because I'm getting a game that needs 2 people to play it." Charlie realised that nobody else would be at Benjamin's party. This made him feel even more guilty. Runner Bean began to whine, almost as if he'd guessed that he wouldn't be appearing on Benjamin's birthday card. "I'll be there," said Charlie cheerfully. He hadn't bought a present yet. He would have to rush out to the shops before he began his quest. But what quest was that? Something seemed to be hijacking Charlie's thoughts. "Want to come for a walk with Runner?" Benjamin asked hopefully. "Okay." Maisie shouted something about supper as Charlie and Benjamin left the house, but the wind howled round their heads and a clap of thunder drowned out her words. Runner Bean yelped as a conker hit his nose, and Benjamin managed to smile at last. The 2 boys and the dog ran into the wind. Leaves flew in their faces and stuck to fur and clothes. Charlie felt better in the open air. Perhaps it really had been a trick of his imagination. He hadn't heard voices at all. It was just some silly nonsense that he'd made himself believe, and Grandma Bone had encouraged him, just to annoy Maisie and upset his mother. "Yes," Charlie cried happily, "it's all rubbish." "And leaves," said Benjamin, who thought Charlie meant the litter being blown down the street. "And leaves," sang Charlie. He saw a newspaper flying towards him and stuck his foot out to catch it. But the paper lifted in a sudden gust and wrapped itself round his waist. As he pulled it away from him, a picture on the front page caught his eye. A mean-looking boy stood on the steps of a grey building. He had a long, narrow face, and a wispy moustache grew above his thin upper lip. His dark hair, parted in the centre, had been drawn back into a ponytail. "What's that?" asked Benjamin. "Just a boy," said Charlie, and yet he had the suspicion that this wasn't just any boy. Benjamin leaned over Charlie's arm and read, "Manfred Bloor, aged 17, was rescued from a fire at Bloor's Academy yesterday. Manfred said he was lucky to be alive." "No, he didn't," said Charlie breathlessly. "What do you mean he didn't?" said Benjamin. "He didn't say that," Charlie murmured, and he suddenly sat on the ground with his back to the wall. He held the paper at arm's length, dismayed by the words that were creeping out of the picture. "Someone's going to pay for this." "How do you—" Benjamin began. "Shut up, Ben!" cried Charlie. "I'm listening." "What to?" "Shh!" As Charlie stared at Manfred Bloor, there came a jumble of shouts, and then a woman's voice broke through the others. "Are you accusing someone, Manfred?" "Too right I am," said a husky voice. "Why do you think it wasn't an accident?" The husky voice again. "I'm not stupid. That's why." A man said, "The fire service told us a candle was probably blown over. Don't you believe this?" "Enough!" Whoever said this had such a deep and chilling voice. Charlie dropped the paper. It whirled away and flopped into the gutter. "Charlie, what's going on?" asked Benjamin. Charlie gave a deep sigh. "I'm hearing voices," he said. "Oh no." Benjamin sat beside him, and Runner Bean crouched beside Benjamin. "What sort of voices?" Benjamin never ever said, "That's rubbish." He took life seriously, which wasn't always a bad thing. Charlie told Benjamin about the photograph of Runner Bean that had got mixed up with a man and a baby. It was going to be a surprise birthday present for you, said Charlie, and now it won't be. I'm sorry. Doesn't matter, said Benjamin. Go on about the photograph. Charlie explained that he'd heard voices when he looked at the man and the baby. He'd even heard the baby cry, and perhaps a cat purring. Weird, breathed Benjamin. I made myself believe I'd just imagined it, said Charlie. But when I saw the newspaper, it happened again. I could hear reporters talking to that boy on the front page. I could hear his voice, too. He sounded kind of mean and sly. And then someone said, "Enough!" And that was the worst voice I ever heard in my whole life. Benjamin shivered, and Runnerbean whined in sympathy. The boys sat side by side on the damp pavement, not knowing quite what to do. The wind flung leaves at them, and thunder grumbled in the distance. It began to rain. Runnerbean nudged Benjamin and whined. He hated getting wet. And then, during a particularly loud clap of thunder, a man appeared in front of the boys. He was wearing a dark raincoat, and his wet hair was plastered over his forehead in wide black bands. "It's raining," the man announced. "Had you not noticed?" Charlie looked up. "Uncle Peyton," he said in surprise. Uncle Peyton was Grandma Bone's brother. He was 20 years younger than she was, and they didn't get on. Peyton led a secret life, even eating apart from the others. He never went out in the daylight. "You're wanted at home," Uncle Peyton told Charlie. Charlie and Benjamin stood up and shook their cramped legs. This was the third unusual thing to happen today. It wasn't nearly dark enough for Uncle Peyton to venture out. Charlie wondered what could have possibly happened to cause such drastic action. That's the end of Chapter 1 of Midnight for Charlie Bone. So, if you're intrigued to know what happens to Charlie next, there should be a link to be able to buy this book from Barnes & Noble or Amazon or wherever else books exist from with this video. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you for story time soon. Bye! Have a lovely day!